Well, good morning or good afternoon to everyone, depending on what part of the country you're calling in from. I want to welcome you to our Finance of America Mortgage Steps to Becoming a Non-Delegated Correspondent. My name is Ginger Bell, and with me on the call today, I have Garrett Griffin. As you're getting logged in, you can look in a couple different places for information. I'm going to control the slides for you, so you don't need to do anything. If you'd like to access the slides in your chat panel, I just put a link that will take you to our information that we're going through today. So you can click on that link and that'll open the PDF for you. You can follow along, but there's no reason to do that because I will be forwarding the slides for you. You can listen on your computer or you can phone in, and there's instructions on your screen on how to do that. We do have everyone muted for this call because it's a very popular call. And we don't want to have interruptions as far as sounds, but you can ask questions. And so you can type your questions in the Q&A or you can type them in the chat box. Either is fine. We will see both of those. And I'll be reviewing questions as we go throughout the webinar today. If I see a question that is covering a particular topic we're on, then we'll stop and answer those. We do have a Q&A session at the end as well. So let's go ahead and test to make sure that, first of all, you all can hear me, and second, that you know how to ask questions. So if you can type in either the Q&A box or the chat box, just let me know what part of the country you're calling in from. And let me know if your leaves are changing yet. I'm in Portland, Oregon. Actually, I say occasionally I live in Portland, Oregon. And our leaves just are beginning to change. But I was in Denver last week and had the opportunity to see the beautiful aspen changing. Did a drive over Pikes Peak, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And some of you may not have that, like Dennis, Orlando, Florida. Not going to happen. But hopefully you are safe. We will be visiting Orlando. In fact, just booked flights there this morning, so we'll be in Orlando in December. So you'll have to look for information there. So yeah, and Sergio, your leaves haven't changed yet either. So I'm truly positioning myself as a Northwesterner or Westerner. I grew up in Colorado, so but I'll be down in LA on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to your nice warm weather. Okay, you all know what to do as far as asking questions, so let's get started. As I said, my name is Ginger Bell. I'm an education specialist with Go2Training. I'm a consultant with Finance of America and have helped them to develop a lot of their training material, their FAM University, and then different webinars that we have like this. I have the honor and privilege of being on this call with Garrett Griffin. Garrett is the National NDC Sales Manager, and he has over 32 years of mortgage industry experience. His previous experience includes over 17 years as a regional manager at Flagstar, and there he helped to introduce and launch the Non-Delegated Correspondent Business Channel. And guys, Garrett is one of the most passionate people in the industry to help mortgage professionals evolve into becoming correspondent lenders. And I think you'll pick that up on the call today. So Garrett, thank you so much for joining the call and for your expertise, and welcome.
It is my distinct privilege to get the opportunity to visit with a core group of mortgage bankers that are wanting to take their business to the next level, Ginger.
And that's what we're going to talk about. And for those of you who are on the call, if you already are a mortgage banker, then we're going to go through some steps. You're probably on this call because you're not a mortgage banker. Maybe you're working for somebody who is a mortgage banker. You're thinking of going out on your own, or you're a mortgage broker, looking at becoming a non-delegated. And that's really our goal today, is to walk you through those requirements. What are the steps you need to take? We're going to talk about resources for licensing, because the licensing in many states to become a non-delegated correspondent is different than what you have for being a broker. We're going to talk about net worth requirements. We're going to review part of the file flow process, and then talk about steps as far as getting started with FAM, and then some of the common questions that we see. So let's start out with the very first thing, and that is, what are the requirements to becoming an NDC? So Garrett, let's talk about that. We'll begin with net worth. What's typically the requirement? And we have the FAM requirement, but what do they need to do as far as planning for some of their excuse me, requirements for net worth?
Well, that's a great point to bring up, Ginger. So FAM's requirement is a $75,000 unaudited net worth. What we're seeing out in the industry is to become a non-delegated correspondent, obviously the customer needs to have a warehouse bank. And the warehouse bank requirements for net worth can vary nationally, but we do have some partners that will go as low as $50,000. As an investor, our $75,000 net worth entry point is extremely competitive. And, you know, again, I'm emphasizing unaudited financials. So we accept and our warehouse partners accept the financial compilations that are provided to us by our customers. So there's no need, they don't have to go out and hire a CPA to get expensive audited financials.
And that's important because it is very expensive to go through that process. So becoming an NDC is that first step in getting into the correspondent channel without having to have the investment that you typically would have to have in becoming a true correspondent, right?
Yeah, you know, and I want to back up just a little bit and say, you know, my role and FAM's role in helping our customers transition into the non-delegated correspondent role is to put them in a structure that mitigates risk and provides an ability to get into this without hiring a lot of full-time employees. So at every component, there's an outsourced solution that's available for our customers so that they, again, don't have to feel like to get into this, they're going to have to go hire a lot of expensive full-time employees. But our goal is to transition a successful mortgage broker to being a non-delegated correspondent and while not taking on any substantial additional risk in their business model than they do today.
Right. So licensing, typically what do you see as far as licensing from state to state to become an NDC?
You know, you hit it on the head. It varies by state. So where I live, I'm from Dallas, Texas. We don't have any separate licensing for a mortgage banker. It's just one license here. But there are states that to have a mortgage banking license, and I'm thinking Georgia is one that comes to mind. I think the state of Georgia does require a $250,000 audited net worth. So it's very important to check with your state regulator and what your state requirements are. Many states don't have specific net worth requirements and separate licensing. Some just require a separate license. Some require a separate license and a specific minimum net worth. And some of them require that to be audited.
Right. And we see that specifically on our East Coast states like New York and Massachusetts, right?
Correct. That's the predominant states that have the component where they're looking for a specific minimum net worth and in some cases audited financials.
Right. So let's talk about errors and omission insurance. What is that and how can they get that?
Errors and omissions insurance is just as it describes. It's an insurance policy to protect the lender and to protect the warehouse bank in the event that an error was made. There's several different vendors that customers can contact for that. Our warehouse partners typically have a list of people that they've worked with in the past that offer a competitive service offering and very competitive pricing. So again, as we transition into the next seminar, which will be choosing a warehouse line, almost every warehouse partner has a list of insurance providers so they can get E&O and/or fidelity bonds with preferential treatment and pricing.
Right, and some of that can relate to the licensing requirements as well, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So tenure, let's say, for example, we have someone who has been an originator and decides to become a broker, but then immediately decides they want to be a non-delegated correspondent. And while we're talking about that, and we have a question from our attendees about what does a non-delegated correspondent mean? So if you can address tenure and then what a non-delegated correspondent means.
In looking at tenure, right, we want to see someone, I want to see someone with at least a solid 2 years origination experience, right? I want to know that they've got some experience in working with investors. getting loans processed, underwritten, and closed. So this isn't necessarily a model for the brand new originator that's less than 12 months into the business that's trying to make a transition. What is a non-delegated correspondent? A non-delegated correspondent is typically a successful mortgage broker that's taking his business to the next step, and he is still originating and processing his loans just like any other mortgage broker does. And we are underwriting the loan for that non-delegated correspondent, hence non-delegated. A delegated correspondent is the next level above, typically with $1 million audited net worth, where they're looking to hire underwriters and actually underwrite their own business.
Right. Thank you. So the next two topics are compliance plan and QC plan. And, I have been working in the area of compliance for the last 10 years. And this is probably the most common question, Garrett, that I get. And I get referred a lot of people who are looking for a compliance plan or looking for a QC plan, and they're not really sure what the difference is between the two. So what is the difference between a compliance plan and a QC plan?
Well, a compliance plan is, in my opinion, is just that, right? It's your corporate plan as to how you're going to remain compliant with local, state, and federal regulations. And a QC plan takes that to the next level. That's a quality control plan where you're getting down to a loan level basis and auditing files for specific compliance. Now, Ginger, I know you have specific industry experience in that. What's your definition of the two?
So a compliance plan is your policies and procedures. As you said, what do you have in place to make sure that you are being compliant? And, how are you following through that? How are you making sure that if mistakes are made, they're being corrected? And that's really what the CFPB and your state examiners want to see. They want to see that you have policies and procedures in place, that you're monitoring, that you're sharing those policies and procedures and what your plans are with your staff, that you're checking to make sure they're doing it, and if it's not being followed, that you're correcting it. A QC plan is really getting into how you are doing quality control. So how are you implementing that compliance plan? How are you auditing your files? One of the advantages of being a non-delegated correspondent is you do not have to have a robust QC plan, because what you're doing in submitting loans as an NDC is very similar to what you're doing in submitting your loans as a broker. And that's actually one of the questions we have in talking about the definition of NDC. What's the difference between a broker submitting loans to you or an NDC submitting loans to you? And then what's the advantage of a broker becoming an NDC? And that's a great question. And I think, John, we're going to hold on to that question and talk about that, because we have some great points that we'll get into on that. So really that's what I see the difference. So Garrett, let's talk about what the requirements are to become an NDC with FAM.
Well, as we shared, we typically want to see them to be in business at least 2 years, right? Exceptions can be made. We want to see a minimum $75,000 unaudited net worth, right? We want to see errors and omissions insurance with a minimum coverage of $300,000 and a maximum deductible of $50,000. And we want them to have a traditional warehouse, a bona fide third-party warehouse facility with a minimum line amount of $1 million. Obviously, they've got to be properly licensed and be in good standing with all the government licensing revenue collection agencies. So, and then typically we're also going to want to see a report card if they're an existing NDC coming on board with us from another investor, giving us an idea of what their performance has been.
Okay. And I know we're going to have a call next month, October 5th, I believe. We'll have some more information coming out on that with First Funding, which is really one of the leaders for brokers transitioning into becoming NDCs in a great NDC warehouse facility. But a minimum line of $1 million, how easy is it to get that?
It's becoming easier and easier. So First Funding, as an example, I believe has a minimum, their minimum net worth is they'll go as low as $50,000, right? Our minimum is $75,000. And then they also don't necessarily have a hard minimum cash position. So I was talking to Nate Clear, who's one of the sales professionals there, and he said, he's seen people approve with cash positions of $10,000 to $15,000. So again, And the warehouse facilities that specialize in the non-delegated correspondent space have really learned to rely on the investor, Finance of America, and our underwriting criteria and quality control to ensure they know that if Finance of America has cleared a loan to close, which means ready to purchase, then they have a high level of certainty when they advance the money, as long as it's closed properly, that that loan will be purchased. And hence why that process has become more streamlined and more lenient.
All right. So let's get into the actual steps then, because there's obviously steps, and I think when you're looking at becoming an NDC, you want to know, okay, where do I start? And before I get into that, we have one question that came in as far as the net worth. So is that net worth for the mortgage company, the corporation, or for the owner of the corporation?
That's a great question. So the warehouse facility in FAM is going to be looking for that net worth in the company. Many warehouse facilities will, however, additionally look at the owner's personal net worth, because all warehouse facilities require a personal guarantor on the warehouse line. So whoever owns the company is going to have to sign personally on the warehouse facility. So that's, again, it's for purposes of getting approved at FAM and for getting approved with the warehouse facility, they're looking for the net worth in the company, but they also have the ability to look at the personal net worth of the guarantor.
Very good. So, and again, as you're getting questions, type them in there. I can see them, and we'll make sure and address all of those as we go along. So let's start with the first step. And in my opinion, and when I coach individuals who are looking at becoming NDCs, and Garrett, I know for you, the first thing you want to look at is, what are the requirements? Because if you are in a state that's going to require a $250,000 net worth, then you're going to have to make sure you meet that first. So you want to start first to find out what the licensing requirements are for your state. And remember, if you're doing business in multiple states, then you have to meet those requirements in multiple states. So start at the NMLS site. Now, the NMLS does not have all that information. It would be oh so nice if they did, but unfortunately they don't. But what they do have is a link to your state sites. And I know years ago I had a spreadsheet that had all this information in there, Garrett, but it's hard to keep up on all of that as you go along. But I know, obviously, if you have questions, Garrett is a great person to contact. There are other resources. If you need help in getting licensing, we have resources that are available to help you do that as well. But that's really where you want to start. Find out. Go ahead, Garrett. No, go ahead.
I was just going to, a big, and we're going to have a separate webinar on choosing a warehouse partner. But your warehouse partners are phenomenal resources for this very same information. They have to keep a database current of what all the different state requirements are, and the good warehouse facilities are an integral portion of making this transition and helping you in that partner steps with a lot of the steps that we're talking about. So I know, as an example, First Funding has a very robust database, and they can tell you what the state licensing requirements are in virtually every state they do business in.
Exactly, because they have to research that as well, and they have to verify it. So where you want to start is at the NMLS site, which is a really long address to remember, so I just go to Google and put in NMLS. And then what I recommend is that if you get started, click on the Get Started as a company, and there's also resources and things like that there. They'll talk about what the requirements are within the state. So you'll get linked to your state to find out what those requirements are. So that's step one. Step two, if you haven't already done it, and I know, Garrett, we're seeing a lot of originators who have been with a retail branch, maybe used to be a broker, and said, hey, you know what, I want to go back and I want to have my own business again. And they leapfrog over being a broker just to being an NDC. Then you're going to have to get started with a business name. And so in doing so, find out what the requirements are, is getting registered, getting your domain, searching for registered names. That's very important. I know I was working with someone last year, helping them on their branding and marketing. And they had chosen a URL that actually was very similar to someone else that had a URL, and they hadn't researched it. And so as soon as we put their site up, immediately we got contacted by this other company. And so you want to research, and that's important to do that, especially if you're just getting started in selecting a business name. And then if you're setting up your business, what's your structure? Are you going to be, and Mitch, you had a great question. Is that the net worth of the company, or is it net worth of the individual? So how are you going to structure your business? And then remember to check for your state licensing requirements. So that's if you're getting started from scratch, the things that you want to do. Next, and we talked about this, is establish a compliance plan. Your compliance plan needs to be written as an NDC, not as a broker. And as an NDC, you want to make sure that it includes all the processes that you have in place. As a broker, you are not responsible for closing docs. You're not responsible for ordering wires. So that's not included in your compliance plan, which I hope you all have compliance plans as mortgage brokers because you do need them. But as an NDC, it's going to be different. It must include your policy.
Can I jump in here for just a second, Ginger?
Absolutely.
I know a lot of you guys are very successful originators that are on this call right now, and you look at this and go, holy smokes. Compliance plans and QC plans. I have no idea. Well, I got some good news for you. You can outsource that, and I'll let Ginger specifically address how you outsource and resources. So you don't necessarily have to take this all on from scratch, get out the yellow legal pad, and hope you can put this together. I want to make that real clear that you don't necessarily have to individually do all this. There are outsourcing resources that can do this for you at a very fair nominal price.
Yeah, and we have those too. So we're in the process of creating a site. And if I could get some of my projects off my plate, I could work on it a lot sooner, but to be able to have some of these resources. So if you are looking at this, and Garrett, that is very true, you don't have to do it. And I wouldn't expect you to do it. Outsource that. There's a lot of great resources for that to be able to have it, but you still need to have it. And you need to use it, and it can't just be put in your desk drawer and you dust it off every once in a while. So you want to consider, as far as a QC plan, that can be part of your compliance plan as well, but what that is. What is your plan for fulfillment? And we'll talk about this a little bit. We actually talked a lot about this in our last webinar as far as the difference of being non-delegated. What is your plan for fulfillment? And there's lots of options. Garrett, you made a great point at the beginning saying that's one of the advantages of being an NDC is you don't have to add any staff. There are resources to do that. And but you still need to consider that. And also, include, just like in any business plan, what you're doing, if you do have staff, especially processing for vacation, training, advancement, and then looking at your fulfillment providers. What are you doing for them? You can outsource all the way from beginning to completion. And that's really it. Doesn't mean you don't need it, though. So I think that's the thing. It's like, you still need to look at, it's like Garrett, years ago, 20-some-odd years ago, I bought a Subway franchise. And the reason I bought a Subway franchise is because it had a cookie cutter template. Very similar to being an NTC. It makes it very simple for you to become a bank, to have your branding without having to reset everything up, because you're doing business very much as you have been as a broker, but you have a lot of advantages with that as well. So you want to consider that. So
there's one of our partners on the call. Shout out to Paul, you know who you are, that I called, that's based in California. He's the chief operations officer for a very successful large NDC. And I was having this conversation, and he outsources his compliance and QC, and it's at a very affordable price, right? Because your typical QC plan is you're going to audit 10% of the files, and so he pays someone to specifically outsource the audit and provide all the compliance reporting, right? And he doesn't have any additional employees to have to manage that. So,
right.
And again, we'll share those resources with you. I just don't want you to look at this and get fearful and go, it's not for me. right? Because it can be for you if it makes sense and you don't have to hire people to do this.
Exactly, and one of the great advantages. And also, just a note, I saw a note in here wanting to know if we get a copy of the presentation. Yes, so in your chat box, I have been putting in the link to the presentation, and we'll also send it up in a follow-up email, but I just put it up there again. So just check on that little link there. It says the HTTP, and you can get a copy of the presentation.
And when we talk about outsourcing, right? What you can get someone that will do all of this. They can help write your compliance plan. They can help write your QC plan, and then they can implement your QC plan and provide the reporting. It can all be done, and in some cases, one vendor can do all of it.
Exactly, and we have resources for that as well. So I'll make sure and include on our follow-up to be able to provide you with those as well. And we are building a lot of these. So we talked about this, your policies and procedures, your training, your monitoring. You can outsource this, but you will need it. And you'll need it for your state exams. And many of your warehouse lenders and investors will ask for your compliance plan, or at least your policies and procedures. So as you're setting up, these are one of the things that you'll just want to make sure you have. You can outsource this. Doesn't have to be anything, all put together on your own, but you still want to make sure that you have it. So your next step is to write an NDC business plan. It needs to be written to your business structure as an NDC, and you want to put a little bit of time into it. And this is one of those things, if you're starting a business, you just kind of want to go through that as well. It doesn't have to be a thesis. It doesn't have to be 20 pages. It can be a page. But what's your structure? What's your plan, and what you're doing as far as your growth and your marketing and things like that. And I know we have one for brokers that NAM has been working on. So this is one of those things too that you can work with someone. I have a couple of attorneys that you can work with to do this, that can get your LO comp plan, your business plan, and your compliance plan all written in one fell swoop. So it's very simple, but you still want to have it.
So I want to jump in here and on the sales positive side here for a second on the NDC plan, because the questions has come up, why do I want to become an NDC, right? And we had a call on that, so I'm not going to go into all the details. But as a non-delegated correspondent, one of the many advantages is, one, you don't have a comp plan with us, right? You're the NDC lender, so you no longer have a comp plan with the investor, and you control the LE. And I don't know if anybody on this call has competed against this, but oftentimes in a purchase market, we see lenders that offer no fees, no lender fees at all, right? And you have to compete against that. Well, there's no free lunch on Raw Street, right? So it's not like the fees aren't there, right? As a NDC lender, because you enjoy a secondary market exemption, in the old days, what used to be called yield spread premium, that's now called service release premium, and it's paid at loan purchase. So it's not part of the 3% compensation rule that applies at closing. And that is how many correspondent lenders are able to offer quote unquote no fee loans. As an NDC lender, you control the LE. So if you wanted to offer, you want to absorb those fees, right? Because you're going to get them in terms of service release premium at loan purchase. You have the ability to disclose as a lender and say, I don't charge lender fees. So you wouldn't have to put my fee or your fees. Now, you do have to disclose bona fide true third-party fees such as title fees, but you don't have to disclose any lender fees. And so to the borrower, it looks like a quote-unquote no-fee loan. And so, what are you going to do in terms of your planning and marketing? How are you going to take advantage of that to market to the real estate community and brand yourself as a lender? How are you going to take advantage of this new flexibility that you have as a non-delegated correspondent and recruit the best loan officers in the marketplace? Because as an NDC, mechanically, your loan closes the same with a $75,000 unaudited net worth as someone that has a $5 million audited net worth. Doesn't matter your size, it still closes in the same mechanics with a warehouse line and with the same disclosure flexibility as the biggest of the big. And so in your plan, how am I taking advantage of my new status? How am I going to market myself? How am I going to brand myself? And how am I going to recruit?
Exactly.
And that's Garrett's soapbox for that topic, Ginger.
And hey guys, if you missed our last webinar, which was really the advantages of becoming an NDC, because I'm seeing a lot of questions, I'll send out a recording of that on our follow-up, so you can have that as well. Because obviously that's the thing. You're thinking about, hey, what's in it for me? Why do I want to do it? And obviously being able to compete is another great opportunity for that. So we have some questions coming in. I'm going to throw them to the end right now go ahead and get through the information. So keep typing your questions in, but let's go ahead and get through the rest of the information. So we talked about net worth requirements, who requires what. How about seasoning? Because that's always the big thing. It's, the net worth, does it have to be seasoned for 6 months? How do they verify that? I mean, it's not audited, right? So what are the things you do?
So the nature, right, of financial reporting and I share this, is it's a snapshot in time, right? When the net worth requirement is a snapshot in time. So no, there's not necessarily it's not like verification of assets for a mortgage loan. There's not necessarily a seasoning requirement, right? As approving you for a correspondent, we're just going to use the compilation, the financial statements you provide. Now, again, each warehouse facility is going to have net worth evaluations that vary from facility. But as I stated with first funding, they'll go as low as $10,000 or $15,000, can go as low as $10,000 or $15,000 in liquidity. And I don't know what they look at in terms of seasoning from that perspective.
And each one's a little bit different. So that's one of the things you want to look at is like, is there a requirement, cash on hand? Like I said, we bought a Subway franchise years ago, and so we needed to have $50,000 cash on hand. And it needed to be seasoned for 6 months. So, and that's one of those things to look at with your warehouse facility, to be able to know that as well. Next month on October 5th, we will be having first funding, and they will be doing a webinar with Finance of America talking about just that. So you want to make sure and get registered for that. We'll have that information out shortly. The presentation, I'm seeing a question on that again. It's in your chat box. So if you click on your chat box, I have a URL and you can get a copy of that. So let's move on. We talked about errors and omissions, who requires what, and I think you did a good job addressing this as far as locating vendors. Your warehouse facility will have a list if you need, and so that's a great place to start as well. So let's talk about professional resumes for all officers, and this is one of those things that many warehouse facilities will require that. And so when you're planning and creating this, saying, okay, I'm going to be an NTC, I see the advantages, this is one of the things I need to prepare, make sure everybody has a resume. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure they have the same consistent look. Then keep them very short and professional. But that is one of those things that's important. You should have anyway, but oftentimes we don't, to be able to have that together for all of your officers. Go ahead, Garrett.
And this is what we look at as an investor, and what warehouse banks look at. We're interested in your professional experience on the resume, right? It's not as I'm not necessarily. It's critically important to me to know that you carry a 5 handicap as a golfer, right? I am concerned with how long you've been in the mortgage business and what roles you've had.
Right. Well, and I think that consistent look for everyone is so important because it sets the tone. If you have, it's like when you get examined by a state examiner. And if they go through, they ask for a random sampling of your files. If they're seeing that same consistent look to your files and they all look very good and they're clean and they're organized and put together, then they have a pretty good idea as far as what kind of business you do. If they're not, and you're missing half your disclosures and you're not really sure, where things are, and they start seeing issues, then they're going to start digging deeper. And it's the same thing here. So you want to have that professional look. And the same goes for your presence. Review your website. Review your social media. Make sure that everything is professional and up to date. Because even though, your financials, they're looking at a snapshot in time, they are going to research you. And everything is all social now. Everything is out on the website. So make sure that your NMLS number is on your social media, on your website, especially LinkedIn, because it's usually what they looked at. For your website, make sure you have, a professional look on that. It's not called mymortgagedaddy.com. Have a professional URL. And so, put it in a way that's going to be very professional and up to date.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate the LinkedIn. That's, as an example, that's one of my personal tools.
Right.
I actually hired a consultant to professionally write and create my LinkedIn profile. And so I'm a big LinkedIn user, and it's very important that whatever resume information you provide is congruent and matches just to what you have on your LinkedIn profile.
Right. So now you have everything in place. So now it's time to execute your plan. And so, it's one of those things. And, Garrett, I kind of feel like we're mom and dad here saying, okay, mom says you have to do this. And dad says, yeah, it's okay. But, it's how much time you have to put into this. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. But following the steps are very important to do that. So begin with step 1 of your plan, find out what the licensing requirements are, find out what the warehouse facility requirements are, and then start executing that plan. And be sure to set a timeline for completion, because you all are busy. You're all very successful originators, and many of you very successful brokers. And so it's a matter of, okay, when's my deadline and what are the little steps that I need to take in order to meet that? I do a lot of sales coaching, Garrett, as you know. So it's like, okay, this is what you're going to accomplish. So what are you going to do in order to be able to accomplish that, and set that in place and hold yourself accountable for it? I think that's important. Step 11, establish a warehouse lender. So before you get started with Finance of America and getting approved, you need to have a warehouse lender. And so you want to complete those agreements, share with them your business plan, include your policies and procedures, attend training. First Funding, who we'll have on next month, they actually do training for you, and they are a great coach to be able to help you through that transition as well. So that's the next thing you want to do, is establish the warehouse lender. Then you establish your wholesale relationships. And I think it's important to know how all of these steps line up, because if you start out and say, okay, Garrett, I'm on board, sign me up. Garrett's going to say, okay, do you meet the licensing requirements? Do you have your net worth? So make sure and follow this plan. And we have a question I'm going to ask right now, because it does have to do with getting started with Finance of America. So Garrett, if they're currently an approved broker with Finance of America, do they have to send a new application to become an NDC?
That is a fantastic question. We have a streamlined process. Our non-delegated correspondent program is actually an addendum to the wholesale agreement. So if you're currently an approved wholesale broker with Finance of America, contact your account executive. We will get a non-delegated wholesale addendum to you. It's not an application. It does ask for a little bit of information, but it's going to include, we want to see, guess what? A copy of your warehouse line approval letter. We want to see your E&O. We want to see your fidelity bond. We want to see a couple of investor scorecards. So and by the way, it's a very quick process at Finance of America. If you have all of your stuff together, we can typically have someone approved for a non-delegated correspondent in as fast as 48 to 72 hours, cradle to grave.
Once you have everything set up, so your E&O insurance, your warehouse lender, all of those kind of things.
Yeah. That's assuming you've got all those steps completed. But to get approved with Finance of America can be as quickly as 48 to 72 hours.
Right.
And I'm happy to send any of you guys that want. We can talk about my passion, by the way, is converting brokers to non-delegated correspondent. It's been my distinct privilege in my career to be personally involved in well over 100 companies converting from broker to non-delegated correspondent. And knock on wood, to date, I've never had anybody ask to go back. There were. I have had some folks where their financial situation changed due to personal catastrophic circumstances that can no longer do it. But it's a better model for a lot of people. And, you'll get my contact information. And again, you're never an interruption if you want to bounce questions off me. Think of me as an unpaid business consultant for you to help you make this transition. It's what I was hired for, and it's what I love to do. I eat, breathe, sleep, and dream it.
And it's true. I know that. So let's talk about some other steps to consider. And we've got some really smart people on the call because you all are already asking about these. So Bill, here's your answer as far as how the appraiser is selected. And Garrett, I'll let you go ahead and talk about this.
And so when you're a non-delegated correspondent, we ask that you have AIR policies and procedures. And that's basically a document that describes how you're going to remain AIR compliant. In the briefest description, if you use AIR compliant AMCs, right, you're going to be AIR compliant. But we do allow you to order from any regional or any local or any AIR compliant AMC of your choice. You are not bound by my appraisal list. Now, if we do have an AMC on our approved list, and we have a bunch that you like doing business with, you can order through our portal, and that appraisal would be ordered in your name, and of course it's portable because it's in your name. So you have a choice. If you like the appraiser AMCs that are in my system, great, you can order, it'll be done in your name, and it's portable, or you can use any AIR compliant AMC of your choice. So if you're in an area where, you know, the national guys don't necessarily have the best reputation or footprint, and you've got a relationship with someone that's local or regional, we absolutely allow you to take advantage of that as a non-delegated correspondent. That's one of the top reasons that I see people want to make the transition.
Absolutely. And we've also provided some links as far as Freddie Mac's CDP registration and Fannie Mae's is there as well. So you can access that if you decide that it's something you want to do. And then here's the requirements. And Garrett, do you want to address this a little bit?
Well, again, essentially, we want to make sure that you're AIR compliant, right? And so we're looking for your policies and procedures and what your plan is to remain AIR compliant. I've seen those plans be as short as 2 pages, and gosh, I've seen some that's gone out to 20. But, you know, again, you know, the Ginger's listed these required HVCC forms, but in effect, we're just looking for you to have some kind of a plan in effect of how you're going to remain AIR compliant, and then you have ownership of how you want to order your appraisal.
Right. And so these are that's a direct link to Fannie Mae's AIR policy. Gives you an idea as far as what that looks like. So our next question we had, and Helen, this is to your question you previously asked about MERS. So MERS, and I'll let you talk a little bit about this, Garrett, as far as what it is, and it's very simple to get set up on this, right?
Yeah, MERS stands for Mortgage Electronic Registry System. It basically streamlines the post-closing process, and you're able to get set up with the MERS e-registry. It's very simple and straightforward to do, and basically, you know, you get a MIN number, which stands for Mortgage Identification Number. That's a unique identifier for every loan. And when you get set up with MERS as an NDC, and then you will provide that MIN number on your loans.
Very good. So yes, those are 2 things you need to get. Once you have that, and it's going to go on every loan. So some of the differences go through the file flow process and the role. So let's talk a little bit about that. And Garrett, I'll let you start at the top where they take the application and then send disclosures.
Yeah, you know, so from the application process through underwriting, it works in the same methodology as it does as a mortgage broker. So you're going to take the application, process the loan, and send disclosure. You're going to submit that to Finance of America for underwriting. We're going to make an underwriting decision and issue a clear to close or clear to purchase. At that point, you actually take ownership on what methodology you want to use to order your closing docs, your wire, and authorized disbursement. And then once the loan has dispersed its settlement right, you're going to ship the closed loan package to us, or actually upload it. It's an electronic process. It goes to our purchase team. We review it, buy your loan, and you get paid.
Very good. So really then the difference and the roles are just this, right? So non-delegated is going to originate the loan. Finance of America is going to underwrite the loan and give approval for docs, prepare the docs through FAM Express. Then the warehouse bank is going to transmit the wire to fund the loan on behalf of the NDC lender, and then ship the collateral to the investor, and then Finance of America purchases the loan.
Yeah, and while it's not written in here under roles, under originate, right, as an NDC, you are going to disclose. We're not going to disclose for you. You're going to disclose as an NDC lender. So you're going to issue the LE in your name.
Right.
And thus, you control the fees that are disclosed on the LE.
Right. So, and with that, because we had a question, is there a maximum amount for the service release premium?
That tickles me. No, it's whatever max pricing that we currently offer. So if I'm paying 107 and you can get a net price of 107 based on your loan criteria, that's what we're going to be willing to pay as a service release premium.
Right. And so, you know,
we don't cap. There are. By the way, that is a good question. There are some investors that cap premium or service release premium to their customers. Some I've seen as low as 103. We do not have that cap. Not at Finance of America.
Right.
And that's, of course, in addition to what you're able to charge up front. Right. You're still bound by the by QM and the legislative fee caps. Right. You still can never exceed 3% on the front. But the service release premium is whatever the max price I'm paying at that time that you're able to get in the form of a net price.
Right. So the steps we just went through, and we've had a couple of questions. So John, I want to make sure that what we just went through addressed your question as far as the difference between NDC and a broker. We do have, excuse me, more details what we went through with our last webinar, and I'll send a copy to that. And I know, Josh, you have a question as far as an NDC, what type of loans you can do, VA, FHA, forward and reverse, and USDA. So Garrett, I'll let you address that before we move on to the approval process.
So as a non-delegated correspondent, most of our customers do not have direct FHA approval. They're not approved with HUD. So they would be able to sell us all conventional loans, VA and USDA as a non-delegated correspondent. And then you could, again, and we're not an either or either. So if you're approved with us as wholesale and NDC, if for some reason you decide, well, I love Finance of America, but I don't want to close this particular conventional loan as a non-delegated, we will allow you to still table fund that transaction as well. So you would, but what's eligible is conventional, VA, USDA, and then you would still wholesale us your FHA or any loans you were uncomfortable doing as a non-delegated correspondent.
Right. So you still have that ability. So let's talk about getting started with Finance of America, and I'll let you go through the steps, Garrett.
Yeah, so, go to bamwholesale.com and become a broker, non-delegated correspondent. The process at Finance of America is every customer gets a wholesale approval. If you're not doing business with us today, you're going to get a wholesale approval and an NDC approval, and you get two sets of credentials because we allow you to do both wholesale and correspondent. And so you get the wholesale application agreement, you get the NDC addendum and agreement, and the correspondent seller's guide, which is for your reference. Typically, when we get new customers approved, I do hold a new NDC lender orientation call where I introduce you to what I like to say is your FAM dream team. So your sales professional, your center management, your underwriting, your customer service, and the purchase team. So that we get you off on the right foot and get everybody oriented to have a phenomenal experience. And then obviously we're going to supply you with additional reference materials upon approval. That's it.
Yep. And so then there's step 4, and all of these are in the presentation. You can access a copy of that presentation, and I'll send that out as well. So it looks like we're having some questions as far as how to get started and the difference in being in the roles and how you can start working. So a lot of the questions I'm getting, I will send to Garrett. Garrett will reach out to you and answer those questions specifically because I want to make sure that we do stick to our time that we have committed to for you all because I know you all are busy, but we do want to get your questions answered. So if we don't answer it right now, we will be sure to Garrett will reach out to you. So some of the questions that we see most common is, how does a warehouse line work? So Garrett, I'll let you address that.
Well, so a warehouse line is a line of credit, right? And so how a warehouse line works is once you have a clear to close, so that's basically a purchase agreement. FAM's going to purchase your loan and you've ordered your documents. That's your source of funding. So you're going to order your wire, and it's from the warehouse facility, and it's just like it says, it's a secured line of credit backed by the individual mortgage loan. It does have personal guarantees on that line, but the warehouse basically wires the funds to the closing agent, and then holds the collateral, which is the note, until the loan is sold into the secondary market.
Perfect. So our next question, did you want to finish something on that?
Well, I was just going to share there's a lot more, and we covered some of that in the last seminar, in terms of things like net funding and how that works, and some other steps that aren't in the scope of this call. But again, I'm happy to address any questions specifically if anybody wants to email me or call me.
Exactly, and we'll have his contact information up here too. So what are the requirements to obtain a line of credit from a warehouse bank? And you talked a little bit as far as the individual requirements, but typically what do they need to plan for?
They typically are going to want to see a minimum net worth of $75,000, typically want to see someone in business for about 2 years. They're going to want a personal guarantee by the applicant and the owner of the company, a minimum FICO score of 620, and then they're going to want to see a base liquidity of $10,000 to $15,000 at a minimum.
Very good. And I know.
And they're also going to want to see you obtain E&O and fidelity bond insurance.
Perfect. So, and we have such a smart audience here. We're already getting questions in. So, David, this is how long does a loan sit on our line? And that's again a common question we get. How long can I keep a loan on the line before I must figure out where I'm going to sell it?
So, in the non-delegated correspondent world, most of the warehouse banks will not advance a loan without a clear to close from the investor you're going to send it to. So you don't have the ability to fund loans and then pick the investor you're going to send it to. You're typically going to, because you're non-delegated. The investor is going to underwrite your loan. You're going to have a clear to close from that investor, and that's a huge component of the warehouse bank agreeing to advance the funds to settlement.
Perfect. And how long does it usually take? So, we go through the process. They originate the loan. They do disclosures, initial disclosures on that, send it to Finance of America. FAM underwrites it, gives us a clear to close, CDC, and then the docs are drawn however they want to do that, whether it's through FAM Express or through a fulfillment provider, or they have someone that there's lots of options for that. And then the wire is ordered. So are they paid when the wire actually gets sent?
Well, it depends. Again, that depends on the warehouse facility.
Right.
There's some warehouse facilities that offer live checks as a preferred mechanism. And if you want a wire, some of them may impose a $15 wire fee. Some do not. Again, it just depends on the facility. If the facility happens to be a bank, they may not charge that. And in terms of how long it has to stay on the line, once you've sent the closed loan package, and I'll use Finance of America as an example. So if you were to upload your closed loan package this afternoon, we would have it reviewed by end of business tomorrow, right? If there's any conditions outstanding, which, there's normally a couple, you send those in. We typically review those within 24 hours. So I would say 4 business days would be how long most loans stay on it takes us to purchase a loan from the time we receive the closed loan package.
Right. And so, so we're getting a lot of questions as far as who draws the docs and funds the loan, who sends out the general disclosures. And so what I'm going to do, because these were all questions we addressed in our last webinar, and so I'm going to send out a copy of that because I want to make sure that your questions are getting answered. And then I will send a copy of all of your questions to Garrett, and you can meet with him to be able to get those answered. And then Garrett's contact information is right here. So you can get a copy of the presentation, and I'll post that up again in the chat. Just click on that link right there. That'll get you to the PDF, and it goes through all the information that we went through today. So we're going to spend the next couple minutes just answering some of these questions. And if you do have additional questions, please feel free to contact Garrett. We also, just on a side note, we will be at NAM National, which is October 13th, 14th, and 15th in Las Vegas. And so if you're not registered, I would really suggest registering, especially if you're looking at, hey, I'm considering this. We will be conducting a panel there on Sunday at 3 p.m. And I know, Garrett, you have a suite there. You are going to be setting up one-on-one meetings. So that's a great opportunity to be able to sit down one-on-one, get your questions answered. I know that there's several warehouse facilities that will be there. First Funding will be there. And so you can meet with someone one-on-one to be able to get your questions answered. So if you're not registered for NAM National, go on to the NAM website. That's National Association of Mortgage Brokers. Go to Google, look it up, and I can send a follow-up link on that as well, and get your questions answered. So it's
I will be there. I will be there personally, and as will a lot of my strategic partners in terms of fulfillment for loan closings, warehouse facilities. If you want to sit down one-on-one with me for some private consulting, that's a great time to grab me because I'm going to be there for like 4 days, and I live for it.
Yes, he does. Okay. And so, and again, we're talking about benefits. And so I'm going to throw a couple of questions out here. You're welcome to stay on the call and listen to our answers. So we're going to stay on for probably another couple minutes, answer some of these questions. If you're ready to hop off the call, feel free to hop off the call, grab this, get registered for NAM National. And I want to thank you all very much for attending the webinar today. So Garrett, I'm going to have a couple of questions that I want you to address here. One of them, are we able to charge a processing fee?
Absolutely. As a non-delegated correspondent, you can charge whatever fees are applicable, again, as long as you don't go over the legislative fee cap on the front.
Very good. And so as an NDC, does FAM send out all the general disclosures, or will that now be their responsibility to do that?
It will be the NDC's lender responsibility to send out all of the compliance disclosures, which is the LE and truth in lending disclosure.
Right. So the LE, all of the applicable disclosures there. Can they outsource that?
Yes, I mean theoretically they could. I'm currently not familiar with anybody that does outsourced disclosures, but if there's some companies out there that provide that service, yeah, we wouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay. And really, guys, here's a lot of the disclosures that you are sending out now anyway are the same, because even though FAM may be creating your LE, you still have all your other disclosures that you're sending out on your own as well. So really not that much changes there.
Yeah, there's no additional NDC disclosures. It's the same disclosure process that transpires on any mortgage transaction.
Exactly. So who draws the closing docs and funds the loan?
That's a really good question, right? So we support several channels. Many of our non-delegated correspondents use what's called a fulfillment provider, and that's a great solution for a new non-delegated correspondent. And so a fulfillment provider will take ownership from the clear to close. You basically order your closing documents. They'll prepare and send the initial CD. They'll contact the settlement agent and finalize all the fees to issue the final CD. They'll prepare closing documents. They'll order a wire from the warehouse facility. They'll authorize disbursement at settlement. And that's basically making sure that all the at-closing conditions are met for a compliant closing before they release the money. Then they stack and upload the file for you and follow up on any post-closing conditions until your loan is purchased. That's one methodology. We have some more advanced customers. Again, this is for someone that's got some experience and has got someone on staff that understands how to create CDs and closing documents. We have some companies that will actually prepare their own, and we are soon, very shortly, going to be rolling out a new process where you can order either documents only, a CD and closing documents only directly through us, or a full fulfillment model directly through us that will be done by one of our strategic partners, but it's a seamless process with very competitive fees. Did that answer the question?
All right, that was very good. Okay, so Garrett, I'm going to send you a copy of our questions. Feel free to reach out to Garrett. His email address is on there. His phone number is on there. If you're not registered for NAM National, get registered. It's October's a great time to go to Vegas, and we'd love to be able to sit down with you and answer your questions. I want to thank Garrett so much for your time and expertise. For all of you who are on the call, thank you so much. And I'll be following up. Look for an email. I'll put some resources in there. You can click on links. We'll send a copy of the PowerPoint, copy of this recording, a copy of our last recording. And I want to wish you all a great day. So thank you, Garrett.
Thank you, Ginger, and thank you, everybody, for investing your time in visiting with us today. It's greatly appreciated.